around. It's still sunny out, but it's still coming down. I love sitting inside and looking out this big window at the snow. Good morning and welcome back to School of the Rock. I'm Sandra. I hope you all had an amazing Christmas and New Year's. You know, looking out this huge window at the weather reminds me of how many things in life I have no control over. I mean, like the weather. I often fuss and complain over the weather though, even though it's completely out of my control. It's too hot, or it's too rainy, or it's too windy. It's especially silly when I get heated up over a cold day, like today. It seems pointless though to fret over something that I have no control over, doesn't it? The reality is many of us do that, and when things get heated up in life, it's hard to keep our cool if we feel that things are out of our control. But God calls us to show love, to be slow to anger, and be kind to others. And with His help, we can stay cool as an Arctic wind no matter what obstacles we face, because God is in control. In our Bible story today, we're going to hear about someone who stayed very chill, even in a situation that could have caused him to completely lose his cool. Before we dig into the story, say the big idea with me. I can keep my cool because God is in control. Our story is found in the book of Daniel in chapter 6, verses 10 to 27. And the Bible is the Word of God, and everything in the Bible is true. And God uses the Bible to speak to us. So let's listen carefully to what God has to say to us today in our story. Let me set the story up for you first before we jump into today's passage. Daniel was a guy who stayed chill. It would have been really easy for him to lose his cool because Daniel had a really stressful job, and he'd been taken from his home in Israel when he was a teenager. He was taken away from his parents and his home and everything he knew. He could have easily lost his cool. But Daniel never forgot that God is in control. We never know what tomorrow may bring, but God does, and He is always in control. Others noticed how chill Daniel was, and over the years he was given more and more responsibility. Eventually, he was one of the king's top 3 advisors, and the king was getting ready to make Daniel head over all of his men. Of course, this made the other advisors and the rest of the king's men angry, and they came up with a plan to get Daniel out of the picture. They knew that Daniel prayed to God and worshipped only Him. So they convinced the king to issue a law for 30 days, saying that no one could pray to or worship anyone but the king. Anyone who disobeyed would be thrown into the lion's den. The king liked the way that sounded, so he issued the law. And once the king had issued a law, it could not be changed, even by the king himself. If I had to live with a new law like this, I probably would lose my cool. But Daniel didn't. Daniel knew that God was in control, so he stayed chill. Now let's see what happened next in the story. Daniel found out that the king had signed the order. In spite of that, he did just as he always had done before. He went home to his upstairs room. Its windows opened towards Jerusalem. He went into his room 3 times a day to pray. He got down on his knees and gave thanks to God. Some of the other royal officials went to where Daniel was staying, and they saw him praying and asking God for help. So they went to the king, and they spoke to him about his royal order. They said, "Your Majesty, didn't you sign an official order? It said that for the next 30 days your people could pray only to you. They could not pray to anyone else, whether God or human being. If they did, they would be thrown into the lion's den." The king answered, "The order must still be obeyed. It's what the law of the Medes and Persians requires, so it can't be changed." They spoke to the king again. They said, "Daniel is one of the prisoners from Judah. He doesn't pay attention to you, your your majesty. He doesn't obey the order you put in writing. He still prays to his God 3 times a day. When the king heard this, he was very upset. He didn't want Daniel to be harmed in any way. Until sunset, he did everything he could to save him. Then the men went as a group to King Darius. They said to him, "Your Majesty, remember that no order or command you give can be changed. That's what the law of the Medes and Persians requires." So the king gave the order. Daniel was brought out and thrown into the lion's den. The king said to him, "You always serve your God faithfully, so may he save you." A stone was brought and placed over the opening of the den. The king sealed it with his own special ring. He also sealed it with the rings of his nobles. Then nothing could be done to help Daniel. The king returned to his palace, and he didn't eat anything that night. He didn't ask for anything to be brought for him for his enjoyment, and he couldn't sleep. As soon as the sun began to rise, the king got up. He hurried to the lion's den. When he got near it, he called out to Daniel. His voice was filled with great concern. He said, "Daniel, you serve the living God. You always serve him faithfully. So has he been able to save you from the lions?" Daniel answered, "Your Majesty, may you live forever. My God sent his angel, and his angel shut the mouths of the lions. They haven't hurt me at all. That's because I haven't done anything wrong in God's sight. I've never done anything wrong to you either, Your Majesty." The king was filled with joy, and he ordered his servants to lift Daniel out of the den. So they did, and they didn't see any wounds on him. That's because he had trusted God. Then the king gave another order. The men who had said such bad things about Daniel were brought in. They were thrown into the lion's den, and so were their wives and children. Before they hit the bottom of the den, the lions attacked them, and the lions crushed all their bones. Then King Darius wrote to a people of all nations, no matter what language they spoke. He said, "May you have great success. I order people in every part of my kingdom to respect and honor Daniel's God. He is the living God. He will live forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His rule will never end. He sets people free and saves them. He does miraculous signs and wonders. He does them in heaven and on earth. He has saved Daniel from the power of the lions." What an amazing story of a miracle of God. The new law that the king put in place said that no one could pray to God. That was not right. And Daniel knew that. So he broke the law. He prayed 3 times a day to God. Others might have continued to pray in secret out of fear of being caught. But Daniel wasn't scared. He knew that God was in control. He prayed in an open window of his house, and everyone could see that he was praying to God. Even when Daniel was arrested and brought before the king, Daniel knew that God was in control. Even when Daniel was thrown into the den of the lions, Daniel knew that God was in control. And when God sent the angel to shut the mouths of the lions, Daniel could definitely see that God was in control. Daniel never lost his cool because he knew, say it with me, God was in control. Think about the challenges that you're facing today. What obstacles stand in your way? Perhaps you're facing troubles at home. Maybe there's difficulties at school. Perhaps you're having a hard time with one of your friends. You wonder how you'll get through it. You don't know how things will end. None of us know what tomorrow brings, but we can keep our cool knowing that God is in control. We can turn to God and we can pray to God like Daniel did and ask for his peace to be in our hearts as God works out the details. We can pray for wisdom and courage to do whatever God may need for us to do in certain situations. We can read the Bible to find out what God may want to tell us. We can reach out to godly adults that God has put in our lives and ask for their help. And we can chill. God is in control. He loves you, and he'll take care of you. We can trust that God is looking out for you and that God is looking out for me. We all face challenging times, but God is always in control. Always. We don't have to stress. We can stay chill. We can keep our cool because God is in control. Thanks for joining me for this first episode of our series called Chill. Come back next week to hear another story of someone who learned to keep their cool because God is in control. And remember, God loves you, and I do too. Bye-bye.